It was the kind of Saturday afternoon California is known for. Warm sunlight draped over freshly cut lawns, the hum of conversation rising above the soft clinks of wine glasses, and laughter spilling out into the street like music from an open window. Lauren had invited her usual crowd, colleagues from her firm, a few of Eric's golf buddies, and some local women from her neighborhood fitness group. I, Evelyn May Collins, stayed where I always stayed, just beyond the conversation, in the kitchen. I pulled a tray of still warm shortbread cookies from the oven. It was an old recipe, handed down from my mother. I arranged them neatly, wiped my hands on my apron, and carried them out to the patio with the same careful grace I had learned as a young bride. The backyard was buzzing with chatter. Lauren stood at the center, cocktail in hand, laughing too loud, gesturing too wide, her blonde bob swaying with every word. I caught Eric's eye as I stepped outside. He gave a polite smile, then looked away. "Cookies, everyone," I said softly, offering the tray. The group turned to me, some taking a treat out of politeness. One woman bit in and murmured, That's when Lauren chuckled. "Oh, she just kind of stays here," she said, gesturing toward me with a wave, as if I were a fixture, like a parasite. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, just uncomfortable, nervous, but it still landed like a slap. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, holding that tray, pretending my hands weren't shaking. I looked down. Eric avoided my gaze. No one corrected her. No one asked her to stop. I turned, went back into the house, and placed the tray on the counter. I spent the rest of the evening in silence, collecting empty glasses, scraping plates, rinsing dishes. No one would thank me for washing. By the time the last guest left and Lauren's heels clicked upstairs, I was wiping the granite countertop until it shone. Eric passed behind me, mumbled a half-hearted, "Thanks, Evelyn," and disappeared. Not Mom, not even mother-in-law, just Evelyn. 3 days later, I was alone in the kitchen again, preparing my morning tea. I reached into the cupboard for a mug and, in my clumsy haste, brushed a tall glass off the drying rack. It shattered on the tile floor with a sharp, echoing crash. "Damn it," I whispered to myself, bending down to pick up the shards. I didn't even hear Lauren enter. "What did you do now?" she barked. "I'm so sorry. She held up a hand to stop me. "You should know your place," she said, her voice tight. "Don't think you have a right to be here." I looked up at her, pieces of glass still in my hand. "Lauren, no," she snapped. "You think just because you're old, you're entitled? You think living here is some kind of reward for being passive-aggressive and cleaning up crumbs?" "I didn't mean—" "I swear to God," she hissed. "If you don't get out of this house, I'll call the cops." I froze. Lauren had always been sharp, rude even. But this was different. "I'm your mother," I said softly. "This is mine." "You think that matters?" She cut in, pulling her phone out of her back pocket. "Get out, now, or I swear." I thought she was bluffing until I saw her thumb tap the screen, heard the dial tone, and watched her press the phone to her ear. "Hello? Yes," she said calmly. "I need to file a trespassing report." I didn't hear the rest. I walked past her, out the back door into the garden where my rosemary and daisies still bloomed. I stood among them, my breath shallow, the sun suddenly too bright. This garden had been mine. The soil under my nails, the seeds I planted, the afternoons I spent pruning with care and hope. It was the only place in this house that still felt like me. And yet, even here, her voice reached me, sharp and certain, speaking to someone on the other end of the line. She was really doing it. She was calling the police. In that moment, standing barefoot on the back patio, surrounded by everything I had grown, I understood something I hadn't wanted to face for months, maybe even years. Lauren didn't see me as a mother, not anymore. She saw me as an obstacle, an embarrassment, a burden to be removed. And for the first time since Paul died, I didn't feel old. I didn't feel tired. I felt awake, cold and awake. This wasn't my home anymore, but it was still my house. And now, for the first time in a long time, I was going to act like it. It was the spring of 1983 when Paul and I first stepped into the old Victorian fixer-upper nestled on a quiet street in a sleepy California suburb. The paint was peeling, the floors creaked with every step, and the kitchen tiles looked like they hadn't been touched since the 1950s. But to us, it was a castle. We had been married 16 years by then, 16 years of clocking in early, clocking out late, saving every dime. We didn't honeymoon in Paris. We honeymooned in a borrowed cabin upstate, cooked canned chili on a portable stove, and drank hot cocoa under one blanket. That was our style. No extravagance, just effort. Paul ran his hand across the banister that day and grinned like a man seeing his future take shape. "It's got good bones," he said, "like us." And so we bought it, the tired house with chipped shutters and a patchy lawn, and made it our home. I remember painting the living room walls together one summer morning, Paul balancing on a ladder in faded jeans, humming old country songs under his breath. Lauren, just 6 years old, danced barefoot across the drop cloths, her hair tied up in 2 messy pigtails. "Careful, baby," Paul warned her, smiling, "or Mama's going to paint you instead of the walls." She giggled, spinning in circles, a splotch of green already on her cheek. We didn't have much, but we had warmth. Dinners on the front porch, homemade Halloween costumes, hand-sewn curtains, a backyard garden that was more weeds than vegetables, but mine all the same. That house watched us become a family. It watched me cry when Paul got laid off, then cheer when he found a job fixing HVAC units. It saw birthdays, scraped knees, school projects, sleepless nights. It held our memories layered into its very wood. And when Paul got sick in 2006, it became our final chapter. We turned the downstairs den into a bedroom for him because stairs became too much. I cooked soup and rubbed his back through the worst nights. He passed away quietly one morning in that same room, sunlight streaming through the blinds. I stayed in the house another 5 years after that. Every creak, every corner carried his voice. Sometimes I'd walk past the living room and swear I could hear him humming. But grief has a way of hollowing out even the warmest spaces. In 2011, Lauren suggested I move in with her and Eric. "It'll be better for both of us," she said. "You won't be alone anymore, and we've got the space now." At first I resisted. The house was mine after all. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, and it still smelled faintly of Paul's aftershave. But loneliness is a tricky thing. It can make even ghosts feel like company. So I agreed. I packed up my life, the wedding photos, the crockery, the memories, and handed the keys to a property manager to rent the house out for income. I moved into the guest room of Lauren's suburban 2-story, thinking I'd be surrounded by warmth again. At first, it was pleasant. Lauren brought me tea. Eric helped me set up my bookshelves. I thought, maybe this is the next chapter, a shared home, a second chance at family closeness. But over time, the lines blurred. She started reorganizing my things. My knitting basket disappeared. My old clock was replaced by a sleek digital one. The home began to feel less like ours and more like hers, like I was a visitor. Then came the rules. No boiling garlic, no watching TV past 10, no guests without her approval. One day, she told me gently that my garden pots on the patio made the space look cluttered. I complied. I always complied. But something inside me had started to shift. There's a unique kind of heartbreak that comes not from strangers, but from someone you raised, someone you once held in your arms while she cried over skinned knees and lost teddy bears. Still, I held on, told myself it was temporary, that family meant patience. What Lauren didn't know, and never thought to ask, was that the old house, the one Paul and I bought and built a life in, it still belonged to me. The title, the deed, every inch of wood and tile. Even after I moved out, I never transferred ownership. Not to Lauren, not to anyone. I kept the documents in a locked drawer, tucked behind old letters and photographs, because something in me, even in the early days, didn't fully trust the comfort she offered. Maybe it was a mother's instinct. Maybe it was just knowing that some things, like home, shouldn't be handed over too easily. And as I sat in the small guest room of Lauren's house, remembering Paul's smile, the smell of paint, and our daughter's giggles echoing through the walls of a half-renovated home, I realized this. I had given enough. When Lauren married Eric, I thought it would be a good thing. He was quiet, respectful, held the door open for me. The kind of man who always offered to carry groceries and never interrupted. But what I didn't realize then was that Eric's silence would become a shelter, not for me, but for Lauren's cruelty. It started small, as these things often do. Mom, maybe don't cook with fish sauce. The smell lingers. Could we avoid fried foods during the week? It just doesn't feel clean. Can you try to be in your room by 9 o'clock? We're trying to create a calming nighttime routine. At first, I didn't protest. I didn't want to be a burden. I cleaned up after myself, kept my slippers by the door, folded laundry tighter than necessary. Then it was no guests, no music unless with headphones, no drying laundry outside, no buying more plants. They crowded the aesthetic. Eventually, I realized my world had shrunk to a single room and a single role: stay invisible. I was allowed to cook, clean, and water the yard, but not decorate it, not live in it. I became what Lauren once told her friends. I enjoyed being helpful, but it felt less like help and more like servitude. She never said thank you. She didn't have to. I swept the porch every morning. I packed their lunches when she worked late. I watered her rose bushes even when she forgot they existed. I was the unpaid maid, the ghost in the hallway. But ghosts hear things. One night, I came downstairs quietly to warm a glass of milk. I paused at the edge of the kitchen when I heard them talking in the living room. "She's just always there," Lauren said. Eric mumbled something I couldn't catch. "She's draining us," Lauren continued. "She's exhausting, like emotional clutter." I stood there in the dark, holding the glass, my hands trembling. The hallway was cold, but my ears burned. Emotional clutter. That's what I had become to her. Not a mother, not a widow trying to find peace in the only family she had left, but a pile of dusty junk in the corner. I backed away before they saw me and sat alone in my room for hours, the milk long forgotten. But I didn't say anything. Not the next morning, not the one after. That's the thing about silence. It isn't weakness. It's a ledger, and I was taking notes. Lauren didn't yell often. She preferred the slow drip of disdain. But one evening, she slipped. We were having dinner with two of Eric's friends, business types, the kind who call themselves investors, but don't seem to invest in anything but cigars and sports cars. The table was set neatly. I had spent the day preparing roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Everything from scratch. It smelled like a memory from better years. Midway through dinner, one of the men joked, "This chicken's amazing." Lauren, did you cook it?" Lauren laughed without missing a beat. "Oh, God, no. That's our resident freeloader's work." The room went quiet for a second too long, then laughter erupted, shallow, forced. I didn't say a word. I simply smiled. Eric glanced at me and then quickly looked down. Resident freeloader. That's what she called me to strangers in my presence, in the house that Paul and I had built from pennies and hope. I excused myself before dessert. I didn't cry. I didn't slam doors, but I didn't sleep that night. I sat in bed and stared at the ceiling, hearing every word she'd ever said stack themselves into walls between us. She wasn't the girl I raised. The girl I raised held my hand in the rain because she was scared of thunder. She used to say, "You're my favorite person, Mama." That girl disappeared somewhere along the way, perhaps replaced by ambition, by resentment, by a version of adulthood that had no room for softness. But she forgot something important. The house she now ruled with her designer furniture and meal kits, it still belonged to me. It always had. And the woman she called a freeloader, she still had the deed. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, one of those quiet hours when the sun was lazy through the blinds and the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. I was folding the laundry, mine, Lauren's, Eric's. I'd even matched their socks. Old habits die hard. Lauren came into the room holding a sleek folder. She sat across from me, crossed her legs like a businesswoman about to pitch a sale. "Mom," she began too smoothly, "I need a favor." I looked up from the laundry. "What kind of favor?" She smiled, the tight kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. "Just something simple. Paperwork, really. It's about the house." My body stiffened. "What about it?" "It would just make things easier if it were in my name. You know, for tax purposes, refinancing, equity applications, nothing changes. You'd still live here, of course." "Still live here? In my own house?" "I don't think that's necessary," I said quietly, folding a towel with deliberate care. Lauren sighed, as if I were being difficult. "It's just a signature. You wouldn't even have to go anywhere. Walter could notarize it if he's still alive." I looked her square in the eyes now. The silence that followed was thick. "No," she echoed, as if the word itself offended her. "No, Lauren. That house is still in my name. It's the only thing your father and I built together. I'm not signing it away." Her lips tightened. She stood abruptly and left the room. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, I received a phone call from my bank. They had questions about a mortgage application tied to my address. Confused, I asked for more information, and that's when I learned that Lauren had attempted to secure a home equity line of credit in her name, using my house, using forged documents that listed her as the primary owner. I asked for copies. The bank, sensing something was off, complied. There it was, my daughter's signature on papers claiming she was the rightful owner, that she had inherited the property, that she had taken over care of her elderly mother, and was now handling all financial decisions. I stared at the documents for a long time, my hands trembling. It was no longer about disrespect. It was theft. Later that evening, I confronted her calmly. I didn't raise my voice. "I spoke to the bank," I said, standing in the doorway of her pristine kitchen. "I know what you did." She didn't flinch. She poured herself a glass of water. "You shouldn't be poking around in things you don't understand, Mom." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You tried to steal this house." She leaned against the counter, sipping her water. Then she set the glass down and looked at me. "Look," she said, voice suddenly sharp, "you're not getting any younger. You don't work. You don't contribute. All you do is occupy space." "I take care of this house," I said. "I cook. I clean. You exist," she interrupted. "Cook. I clean. Like wallpaper." That hurt, but I stood my ground. "And still," I said, "it's my name on the deed." Her face twisted. For a second I saw something, panic, rage, entitlement, flash behind her eyes. Then she laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You think that matters?" she said. "You think that paper means something?" I said nothing. "You don't own this house, Mom," she spat. "Not really. You live here because we let you, because I had a moment of guilt and thought maybe it would be nice to have family around. But let's be honest, no one kept you here out of love." I felt those words land, one by one, like stones on a casket. She wasn't finished. "And if you won't cooperate," she said, stepping closer, "then maybe you shouldn't be here at all." "What does that mean?" "It means," she said slowly, "you have 1 week to leave, or I will call the police and tell them you're trespassing." That was the moment I realized my daughter didn't just want me gone. She wanted everything. She wanted the house, the history, the inheritance, the freedom to erase me without consequence. She mistook my silence for surrender, but she forgot. I wasn't the one trespassing. I was the one who owned the land beneath her feet. It was just past 3 a.m. when I rose from bed without making a sound. I moved slowly, deliberately. After all, I'd rehearsed this night in my head for weeks. The house was still. Eric was likely asleep in the upstairs bedroom, Lauren too. Or maybe not. She had a habit of scrolling her phone under the covers until her battery died. Whatever she was doing, I didn't care anymore. I opened my closet and took out the small suitcase I hadn't touched in years. Inside, I packed the essentials: a few pieces of clean clothing, my worn leather wallet, the marriage certificate Paul and I signed in 1967, his death certificate, and most importantly, the title deed to the house. My hand brushed against the photograph I'd kept in a silver frame on my nightstand. Paul in his wedding suit, grinning like a boy, and me in that cream-colored dress Mama helped me sew. I tucked it into the case, folded in cloth as carefully as if it were glass. Then I sat at my little desk and wrote a note. It wasn't long. I didn't need it to be. "Lauren, I don't hate you, but I'm done begging for space in a home I paid for with my life. I have nothing left to give and nothing left to ask." I folded the paper and left it under the porcelain teapot she always ignored on the counter. Then I pulled on my shoes and walked out the back door for the last time. The early spring air was crisp, and it carried that strange, bittersweet scent of jasmine and asphalt. As I walked down the street, suitcase rolling softly behind me, I didn't look back once. I checked into a small motel off the highway. Clean, no frills, the kind of place no one asked questions as long as you paid in cash. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long moment, staring at the plastic-wrapped cups by the sink, the flickering TV screen with muted late-night talk shows. Then I reached into my handbag and pulled out the card I had been keeping: Walter Brenner, retired attorney. My husband's best friend since high school. He had been at our wedding. He had been there when Paul got sick. He had been there when Paul passed. And thank God he was still alive. I dialed the number. "Evelyn?" he said, voice groggy but alert. "Everything okay?" "I need to talk," I said. "Today." He didn't ask why. He just said, 10 a.m., my place. I barely slept that night, not from fear, but from the strange calm that had settled in my chest, the kind that follows the final page of a long, painful chapter. At 9:45 a.m., I rang Walter's doorbell. He lived in a bungalow surrounded by citrus trees and hummingbirds. He opened the door in a cardigan and slippers, his reading glasses perched on his forehead. "Come in," he said. "You look like hell, but you always did first thing in the morning." I laughed, the first time in weeks. We sat at his kitchen table while I laid out the papers: the deed, the original purchase contract from 1983, the property tax bills, all in my name. "She tried to take it from you," Walter muttered, flipping through them. "But she can't. Legally, she hasn't got a leg to stand on, Evelyn. This house is yours, every inch." "I want to sell it," I said, "as soon as possible." He raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" "Yes." He didn't question it, just nodded slowly. "I'll draw up the necessary protections. You'll need a realtor." "I already have someone in mind." I left Walter's place and walked 2 blocks to a small real estate office with a glass door and a lavender sign that read, "Jessica Tran Realty." Jessica was young, bright-eyed, in her early 30s. She was the daughter of a woman I once worked with at the library, and I remembered her coming in after school to do homework in the reading corner. I told her what I needed. I want it listed this week. No delays, no open houses. Just show it privately to serious buyers only. Jessica blinked, then nodded. Understood. I'll handle it personally. That evening, we met at the house. My house. I waited in the car while she walked the perimeter, taking photos, making notes. I didn't want to go inside, not anymore. When she returned, she handed me a clipboard. The market's hot, she said. You'll get multiple offers if we move fast. But first, she held out a pen. You need to authorize the listing. I took the pen. I thought maybe my hand would shake, that I'd hesitate, but I didn't. My signature was steady, my heart even steadier. The sound of that pen scratching across the paper was the softest rebellion I'd ever made, and the loudest thing I'd ever said to my daughter. That night, I booked a new hotel closer to downtown and fell asleep with the curtains open, letting the city lights remind me I was no longer living under anyone's roof. I was reclaiming my own. Jessica moved faster than I expected, faster than I dared to hope. At precisely 8:14 a.m., her listing went live. 3 high-resolution photos, a concise description of the property's character, location, and potential. No mention of the current occupants, just charming 3-bedroom Victorian with mature garden and upgraded fixtures. Ownership since 1983. By 10 a.m., her phone was buzzing nonstop. By noon, she had shown the property virtually to 2 cash buyers from out of town and 1 young couple relocating for work. And by 4 p.m., there were 3 offers on the table, all full price or higher. The first was a tech entrepreneur who wanted a quiet place to disconnect. The second, a pair of sisters looking to renovate and flip. The third was a divorced woman in her 50s named Diane, who had recently received a settlement and was looking for somewhere to start over. I chose Diane, not because of the money, though hers was the cleanest offer, all cash, but because she spoke to Jessica with the kind of voice I used to have, tired, kind, and firm. Jessica texted me the contract. I reviewed it in silence, my reading glasses perched low on my nose, hands steady. I clicked sign. It was done. By sunset, the house was no longer mine, but also no longer hers. I sat in my motel room, watching the orange light spill over the blinds, the sky fading into shades of lavender and steel. My phone buzzed beside me. Lauren. I didn't answer. The next call came 20 minutes later, then another, then another. The next call. By the time I had finished brushing my teeth, she had called 7 times. No voicemail, no text. She didn't want to explain. She wanted control. I set the phone on silent and placed its screen down on the nightstand. The next morning, Lauren's world shifted. At 8:30 a.m., a courier arrived at her door with a certified envelope. Inside, the legal transfer of ownership, signed, notarized, irrevocable. The property now belonged to Diane Westfield, effective immediately. Accompanying it was a formal notice of tenancy termination, 7 days to vacate, or the new owner had the right to pursue legal eviction. The envelope bore my name in the sender line. Not Mom, not Evelyn, just E.M. Collins. I imagine Lauren stood there for a while, rereading the pages, searching for some loophole, some missing clause. But there wasn't one. What she never understood, not once, was that I never needed to scream. I only needed to remember what was mine and use it. By noon, Jessica texted to let me know she had received a voicemail from someone sounding panicked. Lauren had called her, pretending to be the true homeowner, trying to dispute the sale. Jessica simply replied, "All documentation is verified and filed with county records. Mrs. Collins is the sole legal owner and has executed her rights with full capacity. This conversation is over. Lauren then called me 8 times. She left one message. Mom, what are you doing? You can't sell this house. We live here. Are you losing your mind? Call me back. Please. This isn't funny. That word again. We. She never said you. She never once said, you built this, or you lived here first, or I'm sorry. Number. In her mind, we lived there, and now we were being removed. But I wasn't just her. By dinner time, my phone had rung 24 times. I didn't pick up once. I watched the sun dip low over the skyline through the motel curtains. Outside, cars moved like ants through glowing veins of traffic. Inside, I sipped the same kind of tea Paul used to make me during stormy nights. Lauren didn't leave a second voicemail. She knew by then I wasn't bluffing, and I wasn't coming back. It didn't take long for the neighbors to notice. By midweek, the whispers began. Cars slowed a little when passing the front of the house. Lawn sprinklers hissed into silence just long enough for someone behind the hedges to mutter, "Is that the daughter?" Getting kicked out? By Friday, the rumors had a rhythm. She's getting evicted. No, she's squatting. Can you believe it? Her mother sold the house without saying a word. I thought that place was in the family. And the worst of all, the one that echoed long after doors closed. Imagine being thrown out of your mother's house. I can't even imagine. I heard them. She stepped outside that morning with her sunglasses on, a too bright lipstick, and her chin held unnaturally high. But the plastic bags under her eyes and the tension in her jaw betrayed the truth. She packed slowly, hoping someone, anyone, would intervene. That I'd appear with a change of heart, that some miracle would undo the very thing she'd spent years daring me to do. But no miracle came, just silence, and a moving truck she had to pay for herself. When she finally wheeled her suitcases down the porch steps, 2 expensive Samsonites packed to the brim, she clutched her phone like a lifeline. It buzzed every few minutes with spam updates, unknown numbers, but not from me. Not once. She called again and again and again. I didn't pick up, not because I was cruel, but because I had already said everything I needed to say. She had never heard me before. She'd only ever talked at me. And now, my silence was the loudest message I could send. Eric didn't help her carry a thing. He stood by the car, arms crossed, eyes distant. When she tried to hand him one of the bags, he stepped back. I'm going to my mother's, he said flatly. I didn't know you went that far, Lauren. Lauren blinked. Eric. He didn't wait for her to finish. He just shook his head, got in the car, and drove off. She stood there alone on the curb with 2 suitcases and a phone. No one answered. That night, around 9 p.m., I heard a knock at the security gate of my new apartment. Around 9 p.m., I had just made tea, mint, and chamomile. The city glowed beyond the glass, skyscrapers like tall candles flickering in the night. My new home smelled of wood polish and quiet, the kind of quiet I hadn't known in years. I checked the monitor. Lauren. Her makeup was smudged. She wasn't wearing sunglasses this time. Her eyes were red and puffy. She buzzed again. Then she knelt down in the middle of the sidewalk outside the gate. She didn't say anything at first, just looked up at the camera, her lips parted, trembling. And finally, she spoke. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't move. Please, she whispered. Just let me in, just for a little while. I have nowhere to go. The intercom was silent. She placed her palms together like she had when she was 5, praying for a new bike, like that would work again. Please, Mom. I watched for a moment longer. Then I stood, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain closed. I didn't do it with anger, just certainty. She had taught me a lesson I never wanted to learn, that even the ones you love most can cross a line. And sometimes you don't go back. My new apartment was on the 24th floor, nestled in the heart of the city, far above the noise but close enough to see it all. From my window, I watched the skyline breathe. Neon signs blinked, taxi horns sang, buildings stood like old friends, arms crossed against the wind. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, fully paid for with the sale of the house. The first thing I did was set up a small herb garden on the balcony, just mint, mostly. Paul used to love the smell. I'd crush a leaf between my fingers some mornings and let the aroma drift over my coffee. Peaceful. The apartment was quiet in the best way, not silent like fear, quiet like rest. One evening, I brewed a cup of mint tea, pulled my shawl around my shoulders, and stood at the window as dusk folded the city into soft shades of lavender and ink. That's when the phone buzzed. Lauren. Her name lit up the screen again. I watched it ring once. I didn't pick up. I turned the phone face down on the table. 10 minutes later, the intercom buzzed. I glanced at the camera. She was there again, her coat too thin for the night air, her hair disheveled. She clutched a duffel bag and stood beneath the streetlight like someone who had run out of time. "Mom," she said into the speaker, voice cracking. "Please let me stay. Just for a while. Just until I figure things out." I didn't answer right away. I watched her shift from foot to foot, cold and exposed. She had burned every bridge, thinking she'd never need to cross them again. I stepped out onto the balcony. She looked up and saw me, her face lighting up with hope, the kind that makes you wish you didn't have to be the one to extinguish it. I said nothing for a long while, just looked at her, and then softly, with the same calm she once mistook for weakness, I said, "Don't ever think you can trick an old woman, especially your own mother. No one bathes in the same river twice." Her eyes widened and then fell. She nodded once, as if she finally understood. I walked back inside, picked up my tea, and pulled the curtain closed behind me. I didn't watch her walk away. I didn't need to. I had already left a long time ago. If you've ever been betrayed by the very person you gave life to, if you've ever stood in a room you paid for only to be treated like you didn't belong, if you've ever cooked the meals, folded the clothes, tended the garden, and still been called a burden, then maybe you'll understand what I mean when I say this. Silence is not weakness. It is memory sharpening its blade. I used to think loyalty meant staying quiet. When Lauren first rolled her eyes at me in front of friends, I said nothing. When she snatched decisions from my hands and replaced them with rules, I smiled. When she laughed at me like I was furniture with feelings, I forgave her again and again because I am her mother, and mothers forgive, until one day we don't, because I am her mother. You see, it's easy to love your child when they're small, when their mistakes are innocent, when their betrayals are accidents. But what happens when that child grows up and decides your life has outlived its usefulness? What happens when the baby you once rocked to sleep turns around and says, "You're just a freeloader. You don't own this house. Get out or I'll call the cops"? What happens then? Here's what I did. I got quiet. I got calm. And I remembered who I was before she forgot. I called the lawyer. I called the realtor. And I sold the house right out from under her feet, not out of rage, but out of truth. Because when someone uses your silence to build a throne, the most powerful thing you can do is stand up. Now I sit by the window of a high-rise apartment I bought with the money from that sale. Mint plants grow in small pots by my balcony. The city hums below me, and I hum right back. The phone still rings sometimes. It's Lauren. Sometimes it's just ghosts. But I don't answer anymore, because I'm not the woman who begged for kindness. I'm the woman who remembered what she was owed and collected it.